All right, we got the first episode of the Chasing Dirt podcast. Your host here, Jack Ellison, and I am pleased to present my first guest ever, Rex Moon. Rex, I'll be doing the editing as we go along this. But I appreciate you taking the chance to, there's an opportunity to kind of meet with me and kind of talk about yourself, your company, Georgia Pacific Pro, as well as some of your innovations. So this is our very first episode. I'm sure we'll screw up along the way, or at least I'll screw up along the way, but we want to have some fun. The whole intent here is to really introduce people to yourself, to your company, and really some innovation you guys are pushing out. It's going to be kind of a long format. We'll break this thing up into sections as we go along. But what I want to first do is introduce yourself and say thank you again. But tell me, how the hell did you get in this business?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Jack, this is really exciting. Thanks for having me. And, it feels like we've been talking about this for a while as an idea. So kudos to you for bringing it to life. And, for the whole industry, I think this is awesome, right? We need to be able to share knowledge across many different channels. And, what better channel than a podcast while people are driving down the road to listen in and hear directly from manufacturers. I think one of the challenges is the manufacturer message sometimes gets kind of, tangled with so many people in between, right? Whether it's the distributor rep or brokers or what have you. So no, really excited about this and the opportunity. Looking forward to contributing and staying connected as we go. But so my name is Rex Moon, and let's see, I've been with Georgia Pacific for almost 14 years now.
That long?
Yeah.
Holy crap. Yeah. So you and I met 4 years ago. I think I was at EVP Supply as the VP of sales there, and you come marching in. I remember it was an interesting day because you knew your stuff, and you see certain manufacturers who know their things, and you know them very quickly as manufacturer partners who know their business. So
I learned a tremendous amount from the whole crew at EVP and you in particular, and just wired in with that team. But, how I originally got into this was kind of funny. It was, a lot of things in my life seem to start at bars, and this started at a bar too. So yeah, I was living in, after college, I got an opportunity. My master's degree was actually my master's degree. My bachelor's degree was in environmental studies. And, I graduated in 2008. If you recall, the economy sucked.
Yeah.
And so I went around to a couple of environmental corporations, interviewed, and, got welcomed back to the door pretty quickly. And, I fell back on my passion for sailing, and I moved down to Virginia. I took a sailing.
Now that's sailing as in not as in SELL. That's SAIL.
AIL. Right. Yeah. This was my version of ski bumming. Right. So, went down and ran the sailing program in the Chesapeake Bay, and hired captains, and kids lived on the boats for a week at a time. And
that's cool. So
again, it was my ski bumming, 2 years on the Chesapeake Bay, living right after college, and on boats all day long. And, I always knew I wanted something more. And I just so happened to make some friends in a local bar, and she grabbed me. Her name's Shannon Haley. She was getting promoted at GP and said, "Hey, I know you want more responsibility and go into a profession, consider my role." And next thing you know, I'm down in Atlanta, Georgia, looking at our 51-story skyscraper, a guy, that had a couple pairs of shorts and some jeans, and I'm wearing my dad's suit and his shoes. And I remember there was an inch gap between my heel and the back of the shoe. Right. But needless to say, I went up, and they certainly took a chance on me. And that started my career here in the janitorial industry.
It's interesting though, Rex. You think about people you met, and we've been fortunate. You travel around the country. I used to travel around the country and meet a lot of different distributors, manufacturer reps through trade shows. But it's interesting, the dynamics, I think, within the Jansan space of how people get into the business. I think there's two major buckets. It's either you're born into it, whether you're direct family, or you stumble into it. And quite honestly, I stumbled into it as well. Of all things, if you studied environmental studies or science, I studied landscape architecture of all things.
Is that right?
I'm slinging chemicals. So it's a passion, I think, that I like about the business. And what I see in you is there's not many businesses you can go into that one day you're in a really sloppy, setting. Maybe it's a food processing plant, or the next day you're in, your Madison Square Garden, walking through, seeing basketball players, practice. So this diversification within this business, and I wouldn't say necessarily the complexity of it all, but just that diversification is what I find interesting, because every single day is a little bit different. And I'm sure you see the same thing as well.
Yeah, full on. I remember early in my days as a street seller, I thought it was the coolest thing walking in the back door of places like, University of Virginia, walking in through the loading dock and think, yeah. Pretending like you belong there. Right. And everyone would just think you're the health inspector at the time. But you're going in and talk to, high level folks on huge operating facilities and, talking through some of their largest expense items, right? On an ongoing basis. So the other thing I really liked about the JanSan industry right away was just the aspect of really trying to understand customers' needs.
Yeah.
And then, applying products, applying innovation, applying different practices, how to use products differently to achieve goals and make their job easier. It was really rewarding, pretty quickly. So, yeah, it's been a great run. The people in the industry are great too. You have such a mix of personalities and types of people and backgrounds, but it's been a great run. And I'm super excited.
Well, good. And again, apologize for this is our first episode, so I learned something about this. I'm doing the producing, so if you see me looking down as you're watching this, or you see awkward pauses, I'm doing the producer mode as well as the host mode. But one of the cool things I like about your company and yourself included is you guys are willing to kind of put yourself out there a little bit, where it's not comfortable. And I applaud you and the company for that, because I think that's something in the JanSan space that's missing. I think people look at the JanSan space and they say, oh, it's just toilet tissue. Oh, it's just this. And we'll talk about some things today, but I think my former owner of my former company, Steve Swaggart, mentioned that JanSan, he's always joked about it. It was a good joke, but it was actually true. But the JanSan industry is on the leading edge of low technology, or at least it has been on the leading edge of low technology. And I love that slogan because it's true. And it kind of upset me a little bit as well, because I wished we were a little more sexier in our business. But I think some of the things we're seeing coming down, I just left ISSA. I think, were you out there?
Yeah.
There's some cool things coming down. And my intent of this whole podcast is, not everyone has the opportunity to meet you. You think about it, you talked about that divide early on, about manufacturers make a great product. They go through distribution to get that great product, but they then have to get to the end user. That distributor and the manufacturers have to get that message to the end user. And when I was working in distribution, the challenge I saw is, my former employer, we had over 250 vendors, and you take 250 vendors on average coming out with 2 new products a year. That's 500 new products that have to be introduced somehow to the end user.
I don't know how they do it.
They don't. And I think that's the realization, is that, let's just say you came out with the best program ever and you take it out to your 500 distributors across the country. And those 500 distributors have, let's just say 25,000, DSRs, or distributor sales reps, whether inside or outside. Just the ability for them to take in all this data and then regurgitate it out to the end user. It's tough. So the hope here is that we can help expedite that whole process. That, I'd like to think of this kind of initial sales call. You and I kind of the same thing. You have this sales call, you go in, you talk about yourself. We'll talk about the company. Then we'll talk about a product. And my hope is that if we can do this thing right, and again, you and others, is that we're kind of having that first initial meeting. So those end users that are out there that want to hear about it, but don't have time to meet you, they can hear about it and they kind of give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's not for them. But if we can do that, hopefully this podcast goes like it should. You should have 10,000 plus touches, if not more, in this 1 hour setting. So,
yeah, I think that's great. I encourage you too, to continue to think about, manufacturers outside of the big ones, right? Like, we're kind of blessed in the fact that everybody knows Georgia Pacific, particularly in our industry. But, there's a lot of startups out there that I've been talking to in this new role that I'm in, particularly on the tech side, that have some really fascinating new products, and trying to get exposure to those folks. I think this is a good platform for that too.
That's kind of on a personal note, that's one of my favorite things to do at ISSA, the trade show, is actually go out and walk the perimeter. The GPs of the world have the center stage, the Spartans of the chemical have the certain stage, the Gojos, all these guys have the center stage, but it's those innovators that are outside perimeter that have the 10 by 10 booth that are actually working that booth extremely hard to get that product to market. So
the 10 by 10 booths, right? That's
10 by 10.
Those guys are struggling.
And some of those guys, you look at them, you go, I don't know if that idea is going to work so great. But other guys, the one that caught me, at ISSA, and not to get off on a tangent, but it was the drone technology. You're talking about the leading edge of low technology. Drones are next level technology.
Sure.
I'm hoping to have the president of that company on at some point. But there's little niche things. I saw a spray bottle of all things, that had a pivoting head. And Tyler's agreed to do a podcast as well for me. But just little things like that kind of move the industry forward. So
that's cool. That's great.
I appreciate your story. Again, we're going to transition kind of into 3 sections as we go through this. For those that are listening, you can fast forward through whatever part you want. Those watching videos, I'm going to put chapters onto it. So we'll go to the next section. But, the next thing we wanted to kind of chat about was GP as a whole. Now, you've been there 14 years, you say, right?
Just about 14 years. That's right. GP is owned by Koch Industries, and a lot of people aren't familiar with that. But we have the benefit of a couple things. One being privately held, but then Charles Koch, our ultimate leader, is he's practices philosophy. There we go.
There you go.
And he's invented this kind of culture and program. It's known as principle-based management, and it was market-based management. We just changed it over. He just changed it over. But the culture at GP is unlike any other. Koch Industries is obviously a conglomerate of many different businesses, Guardian Glass and a whole bunch of others. Georgia Pacific is one of those, of course. Within Georgia Pacific, we obviously have the lumber, the building products business, gypsum, lumber, and then we have the consumer products business, which is both. It's made up of retail, so your grocery stores, and then the away from home business, GP Pro as we call it. So obviously, I'm part of GP Pro. Again, the culture is something that I realized very early on in the interview process, actually, and it's worth noting that the way we interview folks is it's kind of a matrix of virtue and talents, right? And you would think that most companies would simply go interview folks and find the talent they need for a particular role. The way we do it is we actually look for virtue first. So how well do they match up to our guiding principles, the type of people that would ultimately do well in our organization, and then match up the talents, right? Our belief within our culture is that if it's a good person, a person that doesn't lie, cheat, and steal, if it's a person that likes to apply tools to build new things, new ideas, if it's a person that wants to self-actualize or, really seek knowledge and learn throughout their career, those are the type of people that we want in the organization, because we think we can teach them the talents that they may be, where they might have a gap or two. So right away for me, that fit my background very well. I certainly don't have all the talents to be successful, but I like to think I'm a decent guy, right? So, and then my work ethic is strong, and that fit really well in the culture, and that's why I've been there for so long. I think if you ask a lot of employees at GP Pro, particularly those that leave, a high percentage of those, something like 70-80%, end up coming back.
No kidding.
So it's a really great place to be employed, and on the product side, we really focus on innovation. So we pride ourselves in the dispensers you see in the marketplace are some of the most innovative out there. An example of that is, Smart Stock cutlery, right, on the Dixie side of the business. Dispensed, utensils, right? Who would have thought that came onto the stage back in 2008, 2009? And at the time, you're going into hospital cafeterias, right, and grabbing cutlery out of these bins in one of the most infectious environments there is. Yeah. Right? So, just across the portfolio, the dispenser innovation comes to the forefront. And, kind of, if I might break it down a little bit further, our brand promise at GP is performance at work, right? So that's kind of our northern light when we think about our products and our customers and what we want to promise to them each and every day. Within that, it's a matter of understanding customer needs and then solving those needs and then supporting those needs long term, right? And that's something that I embraced also very early, right? Because it is the sales cycle. It's going out and trying to understand customers, not just spitting your product to them right away, right? It's where do you have your biggest struggles each and every day? Where are you losing time? Where could you spend your time in a different way. And then you break that down one more level and you look at the value drivers that are most common in the market. And we call those chips. So that's cost, hygiene, image, productivity, and sustainability.
Sure.
So chips, right? And so this is a long-winded answer around, GP from a culture standpoint, from a kind of a brand promise and value drivers. But I think it's all important in that, we kind of encompass all that in everything we do. So it's been an extremely rewarding experience for me being part of GP Pro and growing. The other thing I'll tell you is that with that whole virtue and talents balance, they give their employees to try. They give their employees the opportunity to try a bunch of different roles to really round out.
Well, hence you're here today, and hence you're in this new position we'll talk about.
Exactly. So, in my career, my 14 years, I've moved, I think 4 or 5 times. So I've experienced different parts of the country. I've been in roles that I belong in. I've been in roles where I was far over my skis, right? And just had a learning and humbling moment. So that's we're an organization that really promotes that. And because of it, we have really well-rounded people, and it's really been a great experience for me.
When did Coke come in to take over? You've been there 14 years. So when did Coke bring this in?
I don't know exactly. It's somewhere around 15 years ago. So I think it had taken place somewhere around 2005, 2004.
So when you stepped in, the culture was the whole foundation was there, and you just kind of plugged into it and ran with it.
Yeah. There was the base, the foundation was there. Early in my days, it was, hey, this is our culture, and this is the way you should start to think. And it was a great onboarding. There's been opportunities to leave, and frankly, I've thought of the type of people we have that I'm surrounded by, sure, and the ways in which I'm encouraged to think, and the challenge that I've been provided. And it's just always kept me grounded. And I haven't found a better alternative yet. So it's been a great run.
Well, part of this too, this whole podcast idea that we're having is, I'm getting, I think I'm in the average age now, which is scary as hell that I'm the average age within the industry. I'm 52, and that's maybe the average.
Hopefully that's changing.
Maybe I hope it's changing, but I think that's one of the things too. And the part of the podcast, not to make this about the podcast, but I think it's going to tie into the manufacturers that I do meet with, is where do we find the next generation? Because what I see within this generation or this group right now, you see the younger folks coming in, and they're more tech savvy. They're more willing to kind of do CRM or whatever it may be. They're a little more forward thinking on that. Then you've got the guys on my end of the spectrum that are kind of in the gray area. Maybe they'll use it, maybe they won't.
Right. Then
you got the guys in their 60s and 70s, and some embrace it. I've met some great guys and just jump all over the technology, and they're doing podcasts as well. But overall, if you had to talk to someone for just a few minutes to say, this is the business, because I don't know about you, when I got into this business, I've been in it 20 something years. I was kind of almost, I wouldn't say embarrassed, but I didn't go out and I'd rather say I was an attorney like my father versus saying, I sell bull cleaner.
Right.
But as we all found out over the last few years, the cleaning industry, if anything, is just skyrocketed because of COVID. And quite honestly, Meredith Rubin, my former owner, my EVP, she joked that she saw a meme when she told me it's 3 or 4 years ago that parents were bragging on what their kids were doing, and the person who was selling janitorial supplies or was a cleaning contractor was actually more appealing than someone being an attorney. And again, where I'm going with this thing is if you had to kind of put the image on or put a picture or a story or a 3-minute pitch on someone in their 20s going to college or just out of college or out of grad school, how would you kind of approach them and say, you should think about this industry. Here's why. And again, I'm throwing this at you. It's not a right answer or a wrong answer, but it's something I think as an industry, we have to figure out how to get that next generation in, because again, you're looking at where we are today. Most people I've worked with, they didn't jump in this business in their 20s.
Yeah.
They fell into it in their 30s. And again, maybe they stumbled a few times in their 20s and they jumped into it, but I'd like to see someone that truly gets it in their 20s and rides it through the whole way through.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, that question up. I just actually suggested to my niece, who is graduating college this spring, to check out our Jumpstart program, which is our recruiting program for college kids. It starts your junior summer and then leads into your senior summer. And just so happens that she's going to be joining GP Pro in the spring. So,
that's awesome. Is that a pay for gig or is it
yeah, it's a paid for gig. When you graduate in the senior year, it's a full-time internship, and then it translates into a full-time position. If you come in your junior year, I believe it's paid, some sort of stipend, but you spend the summer there, you start to understand the culture, and you get rotations across different pieces and functions of the business. So you get I think there's an understanding that not everybody's going to come into the business knowing what they want to do, whether it's sales or marketing or category. So it's a great program to kind of let them explore different options. What I told her, I guess, was, I told her some of the stories about walking in the loading dock of whatever stadium it was. I told her about the opportunity to be in front of massive distributors and be this little guy, a 20-something-year-old, and the opportunity you had the responsibility you had to manage big chunks of business, right?
Sure.
And of course, that's true across many different industries and segments. But I think in the Jansan industry, you can really stand out at an early age. And if you have a strong work ethic and you get out there and you prove yourself early, there's so much opportunity.
Yeah.
The other thing I think, or what I told her was, the industry's at a pivotal moment. And you mentioned this earlier, right? I got to say, last week at ISSA, I heard technology, just the word technology spoken more at that event than I had in my previous 14 years in the whole industry, right? So that to me is, and the role that I'm in and the exposure I have, I see a transformation happening, right? There's obviously consolidation across distribution units. Customers are facing a difficult operating environment coming out of the pandemic. And so that's forcing this adoption of technology to allow them to operate efficiently, effectively, and ultimately deliver a product that people are now expecting this day and age. So I think that's an exciting thing about this industry, is we are about to just explode into a transformation where innovation is welcomed. It's not left, in the car during a sales meeting. So
sure,
pretty exciting.
No, I love the kind of round robin approach you guys are taking. I think that's brilliant, because if you think about, again, people you met who got in the business, here's the position we have. Do you want it? Do you not? And you're not given the opportunity to kind of find your sweet spot. And you hope when you make that, you hire that person or you make that decision to come work for a company, that spot is the right fit for you. So I think more companies should be looking at that for those younger people coming out of college, because it's
been a huge success. I mean, the classes that we've had, I think we've been doing it maybe 8 years. It could be longer. It could be and it could be less, but let's call it 8 years, right? Mm-hmm. We've been having this program. To look at the individuals that came in that program and the success they're having now, it's a whole new breed of talent that's entering the workforce, right? And we haven't retained all of them, but we've retained most of them. And to see where they started coming in as a jump starter and, figuring out a lot of different roles. And now some of them are leading teams, 5-6 years into their career. So it's just been a tremendous program. It's great to watch it. It's great to, I'm really excited about my niece coming in and being a part of it, right? It's going to be a whole different landscape when the national business meeting next year, she's sitting there with me, right?
A little more pressure on you, right?
Yeah, a little bit more pressure for sure. But it's really fulfilling and it's pretty exciting.
Well, good. Well, your role, I guess this is where we have the rough transition. So I apologize to people watching, but we are, I guess, going to jump into kind of what we're here to talk about. So I appreciate the oversight about you. I appreciate the oversight about GP, all good stuff. But the meat and potatoes, what we're here for today is, I guess, talk about your new role and talk about, I guess, Project KOLO that you're working on. So you want to kind of take a little bit of a dive on that, and I'll throw some questions as we go along. So I might interrupt you. So again, I apologize, but take a run at it. Give us what is KOLO at a high level? What is KOLO?
Well, KOLO is a circular Peruvian circle dance, I think, where you hold hands. That's actually what KOLO stands for.
Are you kidding? You're serious?
No, I'm serious. That was one of the first things I did. I was like, what does KOLO stand for? And a lot of people ask me, but if you Google it, it's some sort of dance where you hold hands and dance in a circle. But in all seriousness, KOLOs it's our connected dispenser monitoring system. So, all of our dispensers have sensors in them that can ultimately feed information back to a portal talking about capacity, any kind of jams.
So we're talking toilet tissue. We're talking soap dispensers. We're talking, what else are we talking about?
Yeah, that's right. So towel, tissue, skincare, soap, sanitizer. So all those dispensers across the category, remotely provide that information back. So battery life, jams, capacity. And it's, I think it's been an interesting run because before the pandemic, it was kind of a nice to have. And post pandemic, it's a need to have. And I think that's a result of a couple different things, right? Before the pandemic, we didn't really know what the value was. We couldn't calculate, the waste savings, or we couldn't calculate the labor savings. But what we knew it did was it really drastically decreased outages. Yeah. So experiences where you go in the restroom and you don't have toilet paper, you need a spare square, like the Frasier episode. Yeah. And so by doing that, it created value in the sense that it heightened the guest experience in really any facility, right? The washroom.
And people don't think about that guest experience. I guess to your point, if you're ever in a facility and you run out of something that you need, whether it be a hand towel or toilet tissue, that's your impression, right? That's your impression, period.
Absolutely. I mean, it permeates across the entire experience at that given facility, right? I have a stat that says 89% of people or consumers say that a clean and well-stocked restroom contributes to their satisfaction of their workplace and their employer.
And these are both large facilities as well as small, right?
That's it. I mean, it's across
that makes sense.
The same, it's a 90% for high traffic amusement parks or high traffic venues like arenas and stadiums. All those venues are trying, in the workspace, they're trying to attract tenants, and then employers are ultimately trying to get their folks to come back to the office right now, right? And part of that is the experience they have while they're at the office. And if it's a poor experience, they're going to be less inclined to make the trip in.
Well, to add insult to injury, and again, we're chasing dirt, hence the podcast name.
Right.
But the reality is too, is if you run out of those hand towels, what happens? Or the toilet tissue, people do crazy things. And all of a sudden that cleaning time for that restroom has gone from 5 to 10 minutes now to 30 minutes because you're having to bring out special equipment to do certain things around toilets, or you're having to kind of do extra mops because people are slinging water on the floor or on the sink and whatever, on the mirrors, whatever it may be. So I think that perception is definitely one thing, but I think also what work is created by not having a properly stocked restroom is definitely a go-to. But where are you right now? Again, you mentioned pre-COVID. So KOLO's been out there for what, 2 or 3 years so far?
7 years. It's probably been commercialized 5 at this point. Let me take a step back, I guess, if you don't mind, and kind of paint the picture of how we operate in some cases today, but more importantly, how we operated before these types of technology hit the market, right? And you think about, let's just call it an office building. Yeah. And, particularly let's talk about the clean team members, right? And they're going around a facility, call it 40-floor building, and they're literally having to go check every single dispenser every day. Yeah. And
several times a day, right?
Generally it's 2 to 3 cleaning cycles per day. So, you talk about a couple thousand or 1,000 dispensers, that can really add up. ISSA has a stat that says a dispenser check and refill replacement takes 60 seconds. So that's their claim. We've pulled that down conservatively to 20 seconds per dispenser check. Yeah. Obviously that doesn't include the walking distance. So at a higher education environment where the building is a quarter mile away, to go check the dispensers in that building is a lot longer than 20 seconds.
Absolutely.
But you get the point, right? It's today's practices centered around, checklists on the back of bathroom doors or schedules they're inefficient, they're wasteful, and they're costly, right? It's sending people out to do, really just basic work to see if there's capacity in the dispenser. Even worse than that, right? You come up to a dispenser and it's got a small roll in it, right? Yeah. And this employee needs to make a critical decision of, is that going to last? Not knowing what the traffic generally is in this particular restroom, is that going to last until my next scheduled visit into that restroom, right? And that's a big risk, right? And And generally historically they've taken the conservative approach and they've taken that stub roll out. And then what do you do with a proprietary stub roll of towel or tissue? You don't leave it on the toilet because that's, it's not pleasing to look at. Yeah. You throw it away.
I remember, I can remember walking into a large commercial property in downtown Boston after hours. It had to be 8 or 9 o'clock, and the cleaning crew was wrapping up their schedule. And they had, I kid you not, at least 3 bags of partial roll toilet tissue they were taking home because there was nothing to do with it. I guess that's good for the company, but quite honestly, it's rolling the dice where you don't need to roll the dice necessarily.
Not anymore, right?
And I think that's the other thing too. We're talking about having to make those visits, but I think we'll talk about it. But the technology also monitors the foot traffic going into those restrooms, so it's not having to go to every facility. You know that these bathrooms are going to have a higher frequency of use. Therefore, maybe we clean the routine or we check them more, not check them more because you have the KOLO in place. But you're also looking at the foot counter, I guess the foot traffic going through, right?
Absolutely. So the usage of the product will actually dictate the amount of foot traffic in a given portion of the building or a specific room. Going a step further, we integrate with other hardware providers like people counters, right? So those can get as granular as a single desk. So if you think about the clean team member going up to a particular floor and seeing 160 desks and saying, my task is to disinfect these desks. He's disinfecting all 160 desks, knowing full well only a small portion of those desks were actually used and require disinfecting. So yeah, whether it's the cleaning practices, it's the cleaning products that you save by drastically decreasing and only addressing areas that actually need it. And then again, the waste savings too is not having to rely on those stub rolls, knowing exactly when that dispenser needs to be changed out. That's the power of the system. I kind of mentioned the people counters. It also goes well beyond that, right? We have made a big emphasis on developing an ecosystem of sensor partners. So, excuse me, our dispensers, obviously they provide information back into an app, but, other sensor companies like, you think of valves, right? Flush valves and faucets. And I don't know if you've ever been to a stadium and the water's just constantly running, or maybe the floor has water all over it, right? There's a leak.
Sure.
Some of the plumbing companies, we've partnered with Toto, for instance, and, they have now indicators that say if there's an active leak or if water is constantly flowing. And, all it takes is a university to have a leak on their 4th floor of their dormitory and it to penetrate down through 3 floors, and the cost to renovate all that to really realize that, hey, we need this.
So that data is being flown. I mean, it's kicking out real time. So if I'm sitting there going, my routine is to clean this bathroom this many times a day, but if an exception alarms, maybe it's a jam, whether it's a broken dispenser, whether it's out of stock, or it's a leaky, whatever it may be, that will pop up on an alert of some sort, is what I understand.
That's right. Yeah, it'll also provide kind of ongoing information, right? So the interesting thing is to look at traffic, for instance, right? So it will, over a period of time, it'll start to develop trends and trend information. So it'll say, hey, this restroom is, gets hit hard between these hours on these days. Yeah. And in today's environment, we've been going into a lot of office buildings lately, and I'm sure you're familiar with the varying occupancy rates, and they're all kind of saying, hey, we don't really need to invest in this until we get back to occupancy. And I kind of say to them, we start talking and say, well, actually, now is probably you're going to get the biggest ROI right now with the varying occupancy that you have, because again, you're cleaning the whole building when only 30% occupancy is in the building. Wouldn't you like to know where that 30% is?
Good point.
So it's interesting to start to really, I mean, the degree at which you can start to pull some of this data together from multiple hardware providers is really fascinating. And you can start to, input artificial intelligence to understand what the patterns will be in the future. So that can change all kinds of things, HVAC and spend on consumables. So you can tighten up what your turns are. Think about from the distributor perspective too, right? If all of a sudden there's predictive ordering based on actual utilization, and they're not buying, 3 pallets and only using, it's taking them a year and a half to go through the 3 pallets. That's going to help inventory turns on the distributor and the supplier.
Absolutely.
So it really flows all the way upstream.
Well, I was fortunate enough to work with you on one account, a large college here in the Northeast. And again, they were early adopters, and God bless them. They stuck their neck out there early on. I think this was 3+ years ago, maybe 4 years ago, but they stuck it out there. And with any new technology, as you know, there's a ramp up, and I guess, we worked through a lot of the hiccups up there. But the thing that really stuck in my mind about it is I didn't realize how much time was spent, going to and from restrooms to check to see if we were out, and then making that call, like you mentioned. The other account we had, I worked with another account we had was, if you go into casinos, that was a higher education with a lot of distance between buildings, multiple buildings.
And snow.
Yeah. And no parking.
No parking
whatsoever. I think I got a few tickets along the way with that one, but the casinos also surprised me. You think when you go into a casino and, there's a nice gentleman sitting in the restroom, or, ladies who sit in the restroom, and they're kind of handing you a hand towel as you kind of, leave, and give you a little spurt of perfume if you want it. You think they're there for that purposes. And the honesty is they're there to monitor out of stocks.
Right.
And, the challenge right now, and I think we're all seeing and we're all experiencing, and COVID's brought it on, is that labor is very hard to find. And, we were looking, this is before COVID, we were looking at that position. And I think that person was looking at that FT in that bathroom was working 24, maybe not 24 hours, I think 18 hours a day, just to make sure out of stocks. And they'd have a mop with them too, and they'd spray the urinals and do all this stuff.
Sure.
But I think they were paying that individual 20 to 25 fully loaded, maybe more. And something you could do with maybe less people through the app, because we were showing the demos that the app will tell you when you're out. So it's not going a person in each bathroom. And again, that's the key there too, is it's one person in each restroom.
That's right.
It's not, and this is now we have one person managing 10 restrooms, and they're more productive. I think their quality of life or works a little better as well, because, sit there for, 10 hours a day is not the most entertaining thing. Now, if you're walking around from restroom addressing issues, I think the days go a lot quicker. But talk on like the clients you're talking to now. I'm sure these are large Class A operations. They probably have multiple buildings throughout a market that some would qualify for it, like a better word. Some it makes sense, some that doesn't make sense. But what are you seeing on the labor front that you're seeing? What kind of ROIs are you seeing that kind of driving, people to really take a look at this and say, what, this makes sense now?
Yeah. So you first of all, you mentioned kind of the types of facilities we're calling on. And that was one of the reasons I took this role is the types of facilities we're calling on are just absolutely rad. We're talking major sporting arenas, right? Where we're having tremendous success. We're calling on massive Class A office buildings in the largest office building markets in the country. I've never been put on a stage like this before, and it's been so fun.
This is nationwide, right?
Nationwide. I mean, we're talking West Coast, we're talking Manhattan, we're talking Boston, every major metropolitan area, and then even some parks out in the middle of nowhere, right? We have a really cool large government facility down in the Houston market that is very common, and it's just so cool to go check this place out. But let me talk about the value drivers a little bit, because I mentioned a little bit earlier that before COVID, KOLO was kind of a smart restroom was a nice to have, and that was a result of a couple things. Mainly, it was us not being able to quantify what the ROI was of the system, other than, hey, we think your guest experience is going to be improved.
Yeah.
Now, now that we have a base of business that's good size, we can run the numbers and look at the data, and our legal team will allow us to make claims around our returns. And in general, so if you look at our portfolio, let's talk about waste first, right? Sure. 50% waste reduction by applying KOLO, based on only refilling the consumable when absolutely needed. 50% reduction.
That's huge.
Average. That's absolutely huge.
Wow.
Let's talk about labor. Labor is the big one. Labor is gigantic. 95% reduction in unnecessary dispenser checks. So take your average stacked office building. That equates to something around the magnitude of 29 hours of labor given back per week.
Wow.
Massive.
Massive.
Let's talk about guest experience and try and put a number on that, right? we're allowed to claim that 99.5% of the time the dispensers are up and functional and filled, and so guest experience, the amount of outages that reduces is significant. And then I think the most fulfilling aspect of it, and you kind of hit on this, was the clean team.
Yep.
And empowering those folks, the most thankless job, one of the most important jobs. We have stats that say 88% of the clean team members that use KOLO say it makes them more efficient in their job. And the same number, 88%, say that they would recommend KOLO to another business, right? And just going out and working with these folks, walking with them through a facility, having them look at their app, they're charged up. I mean, we have some quotes from them that say, hey, it saves me steps, right? These quotes are more impactful probably to you and I being in the industry.
Sure.
I think people will get it, but I don't have to put as much stuff on my cart. So my cart only has what I need in terms of consumables stacked on it to go address a certain floor of my space. It's, we have some, don't take KOLO away from me, right? And this translates across Smart Restroom, right? We're not the only provider. We have some great competition out there, but this is what we've seen. This is what our customers are realizing. And, it's pretty impactful to go out and tell that story now. Again, the whole transformation of before COVID to now after COVID. And you think about those value drivers and how they stack up to the operating environment today, right? Cutting waste is ultimately not only cutting what you're throwing out, but it's cutting what you're using.
Absolutely.
So when inflation is hitting case price and that's jacking up, you're able to buy less cases, right? Your labor, if you can even get it to show up, right? It's costing a whole heck of a lot more money now too, to have staff on site. How can you optimize that headcount that you have most effectively? And I've got a good story about the labor thing from a BSC standpoint.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So, I thought this was really cool. I was talking to a gentleman up in the Minneapolis market, and he runs a really reputable BSC up there. And he was an early adopter of Smart Restroom, right? Yep. And when we say adoption from the BSC crew, they're the users of it, right? So, really early adopter, and some of the buildings that he kind of got on his folks and said, hey, we're going to use this tool. If our property managers are going to pay for it, let's use it. And immediately I said, what's been the biggest impact? And a lot of other BSCs had said, guest experience and, waste reduction. I'm not throwing out those stub rolls. He went right back to the time back. I said, well, tell me about that. He's like, well, I had this one building, and this one building, if you know anything about Minneapolis, it's got the skyways, right? Miles and miles of those skyways. And it's to avoid walking outside when it's frigid and windy. And this building happened to be at the very beginning of the skyways. And his team there was cleaning the lobby on a recurring basis, I think twice a day. And when they started to really dive into Smart Restroom and use the tool, they started getting that time back, and they kind of said, okay, let's go to the property manager and say, hey, this is working. We got this time back. What do you want us to do with it now?
Sure.
And he wasn't going to go lay off a bunch of people, but he was going to use the people more effectively. So, of course, the property manager went to the complaint list and said, what are our biggest complaints? And the biggest complaints were the odor and the just the aesthetics of the lobby in terms of how clean it looked. And, particularly in the winter when everybody was parking their car across the street, coming across the snowy road, tracking in the salt, hitting the coffee shop, and then hitting the skyway to their individual building. And so what happened was they took that extra time and they took a portion of it and moved to 5-a-day cleanings on the lobby.
Okay.
So 2 to 5. And then they stripped it. However often they were stripping the floors in the lobby, they increased that. They doubled that, right? So lo and behold, they started getting less and less complaints. The smell within 30 days in the lobby was all gone, right? And this has nothing to do with the restroom, right? But
it does.
But it does, yeah, right? And so he kept on kind of telling the story. And I said, all right, what's the end? And he said, the coolest thing was when the appraisal of the building came around, and I think they did the appraisal every 2 or 3 years, and it fluctuated 1 or 2% with the market. And he said the property manager came down to my desk and threw it on my desk, and it was like a 10% increase in appraised value of the building. And the main thing the appraiser attributed that to was the lobby, the experience. As soon as you walked in the door, right, it was a profound, just, this is a clean building. And so this particular BSC told that story. And I was like, that's impactful. The property manager went to the BSC, said, hey, you did this for us. The BSC credited the smart restroom technology to all that time back. So it was, for me, it was like, oh man, that's a fuzzy, warm feeling
that's a customer for life. Quite honestly, if you can bring 10% value to a property, I'm saying, again, will it happen every time? Absolutely not. But even a 2 to 3% increase, I've got to imagine that's one of those customers that are going to take you anywhere they go moving forward.
That's it. The BSCs, oddly enough, are actually now coming to us and saying, hey, we want to go sell this for you, right? They're competitively advantaged, taking it in on RFPs for building sites. And they believe in it, right? They want to use it. So it's interesting.
I think that's what gets me excited about the business. And again, you see there's some great young contractors coming into the business, and they're learning the business, but what they're embracing is that whole technology. And I think it's not just here's how we've done it for the last 20 years. I'm going to bring something new to the table. So I would definitely encourage, because you're hitting on owners of properties to kind of come down to certain contractors, but at the same time you're hitting contractors to go up.
That's right.
To the ownership to do that. So colleges, BSCs, Class A, Class B office towers. What other niches are we seeing? And I'm gonna tell you one of my fantasy niches. When I was talking to you about this originally, one of my fantasy niches, I'll tell you after this. But what other market segments are you seeing? So high volume, high sports venues, or
it's the ones you would expect, right? It's the office buildings, it's the sports venues. Is an area that we've really separated ourselves from our competitors in. And we've actually just recently, surprisingly, we now have a larger base of active KOLO dispensers in major sporting arenas, professional sporting arenas in North America than we do in the office building segment.
Interesting.
First time that's happened. The surprising thing is the alternative segments that this is, you have the higher education space. You have some industrial, spread out facilities with lots of distance between dispensers. But even QSRs.
Really?
Large operating QSRs.
Well, that's where my fantasy comes in. And fantasy is kind of a weird word, but
I want to hear the fantasy.
We live in the Northeast, right? So what is the coffee house of choice in the Northeast?
Dunkin'
Donuts. And I kid you not, when I go into Dunkin' Donuts, and again, they're all, most of the franchises, I guess, I understand, but the quality of restrooms, I'm talking, you go from a 10 to a 1 very quickly. Most of them are in that lower scale. But how cool would it be that if Dunkin' said every one of our stores are going to have these, and we're going to monitor from a corporate level, and it's part of that franchisee fee is that we're going to make sure that experience, because there's nothing worse than grabbing a coffee or a donut and having to go to the restroom really quickly, and you step in and it looks like that restroom hasn't been cleaned in 10 years. I'm talking bad.
You're exactly right. You think of rest stops too, and some of these rest stops are pretty elaborate now on major thoroughbreds, showers and resting rooms.
Buc-ee's. I'm from Texas originally. Holy crap, Buc-ee's makes it experience.
Oh, I love Buc-ee's.
Experience.
Yep. So we're in discussion with a couple of those types of folks in the quick service food, in the restroom area too. Single stall bathrooms in some cases, but a couple of things. I mean, it's the labor, right? They want their people, if it's a coffee shop or some sort of QSR, they want their people, connecting with the customer.
Sure. But there's a bigger connection. And my point is, there's twofold. There's one, because connection you can see face to face, and there's those connections that are just.
It's a secondary benefit of it, right? Yes. It's the experience while you're there. Absolutely. Particularly with some of the cost of these things. I mean, you go out and grab a burger now, it's like $22 for a burger.
No kidding.
You want a nice experience, but yeah, predominantly it's the high traffic has been really good for us. Airports, the stadiums have just been phenomenal. The challenge with stadiums to some degree is they kind of do ebbs and flows, right? And so without KOLO, I had somebody come up to me the other day, and they went to a major college football game the previous weekend, and he happens to own a distributor out in Western New York. And he said to me, yeah, I went to a game, and I went to the restroom, and it's all in motion, but every single one was empty, and there were 7 on the wall. And I said, oh, geez. So he said, we're going ahead and talking about KOLO next week, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, it's really been interesting how it's exploding across different segments that you wouldn't expect. And then, we're fortunate to have a really diverse segment base. Healthcare is the other one I didn't mention. And healthcare was slow to kind of adopt. But we've got a handful in the pipeline right now, and they're starting to turn around. I think a lot of that was due to cash flow coming out of the pandemic.
Sure.
But yeah, it's applicable seemingly across all segments.
Well, that's the thing too, is technology's not going backwards. I have this conversation with a lot of folks that we're embracing. The company I'm with now, we have a lot of new technology we're rolling out, and CRM being one of those, new electronic forms versus paper-based forms. And, the conversation we have though is technology's not going backwards. Robotics is going to keep going forward. It's not going to just stop and it dies. This technology for IoT restrooms, IoT period in general, whatever it may be, is going to keep going forward. But I use the analogy that if I went to someone and said, let me take away your cell phone, there's not one person to say, I'll bless that.
Right.
But if you would have gone back 20 years ago when cell phones first came out and said, I want to take your cell phone away from you, no problem.
That's right.
But I think what's going to be interesting, and it's the speed of technology, the speed of adoption is going to only increase, and the technology behind it and what you guys can do, things you're probably even thinking behind the scenes that we're not even aware of yet that'll tie into this technology. You mentioned the Toto relationship. I think that's what end users have to understand, whether it be a BSC, a hospital, a owner of a large Class A, Class B office tower, is that get on this sooner than later for the simple fact that you want to be an early adopter. The fact that the buildings, to your point earlier, was 50% occupied. Well, guess what? And I want you to talk about this a little bit as well, but there is a certain amount of work that has to go involved with getting this set up. This is not just sticking a dispenser on the wall and you're connected. This is a training. This is installing devices into
behavior change. Absolutely.
All this, but just walk us through. So I'm a BSC, I'm a property owner, and I really want to embrace this. First of all, you're the contact, right? You're the initial contact that they should be reaching out to?
Actually, I have a team of 3. We have 3 dedicated national account managers across the country. So, and I'm very lucky to have, some of the best sellers across our entire business. But, I can definitely get their information. Maybe you can throw it in the podcast.
Throw in the notes. Yeah, throw in the notes. But so we reach out to GP and say, listen, we're interested in this. Are your distribution? Because there's distribution that carries GP across the country.
Yeah, you can call us right at 1-866-HELLO-GP and then say, hey, I'm interested in KOLO. I heard it on a podcast, and
I'm going to throw
definitely give the credit to you.
No. It's all you. You're the technology. I want to throw your email address though up because I want people to reach out to you.
Absolutely, yeah. People can reach out to me. I think that I think what you're bringing up is kind of the barrier to adoption. Like, what is the barrier to adoption?
Sure.
And I think in many cases it's around, where do I start, right? There are a tremendous amount of hardware providers out there, whether it be us or the flush valves or the alarm systems or the HVAC, the people counters, the tush light, the indicator lights on the stalls of occupancy, the Avius tablets outside the restroom where you press the smiley face or the frown face, right? I'm an operator. I don't know much about IoT. I know everyone's talking about it and everyone's moving forward. It can drive efficiency, but heck, where do I start? Do I start with a robotic floor scrubber, or do I start with smart restroom? Do I start with people counters? It's there's a lot of noise in the market right now around that, and particularly that's why we've really branched out and created all the partnerships we have. We did that for a couple of reasons. One is to, whether it be KOLO or any other kind of part of our business, we like to go into a customer and sell them a bundled solution, something that matches aesthetically, something that is easy to maintain across a full set, something that works in unison and people are used to, right? You don't want mismatching fixtures in your house. Why would you want that
Absolutely.
in your bathroom? What we did with KOLO is we've created these partnerships that are all encompassing, both in the restroom and outside the restroom, for a facility to kind of get their feet wet with IoT. So it is the people counters with Butler. They're a big partner of ours. We are a partner with Tush Lights. We're partnered with Avius, feedback tablets. We're partnered with Toto, I mentioned, for flush valves and faucets. And then we have network partners too. Our lead network provider is MachineQ. They're owned and operated by Comcast.
So what do those guys do? What's their play?
So the information needs to travel, right across to eventually get to the cloud.
Sure.
And so, we have our own proprietary network, and a customer can, based on their site and their signal strength, our system can run on Wi-Fi, or it can run on what we call LoRaWAN, which is, a low frequency network. And, we have our own proprietary network. For instance, Toto rides on our network and shows up in our app, much like Butler and some others. But if you really go large scale with this, you need a network that, not only us and our partners, but many others that we may or may not integrate with can ride on too. And obviously a stadium like, a major football stadium doesn't want 14 different networks.
Sure.
And pay for all that. What Machine Q can do is come in and provide a very reliable network with a Comcast backing, right? That fits in almost any environment, that hardware providers, as the facility or site adopts different types of hardware, they can ride on that network. And so we've chosen Machine Q as our preferred network for our customers, so that they get that reliability of signal. But then it opens up, knowing that they're likely going to adopt our IoT and then want to kind of spread out to other providers. Machine Q is a network that will help them long term, support all different types
Got you.
of networks. Yeah. The other thing we haven't talked about in that whole environment, and kind of what I foresee in the next kind of 5 years being a lead in and try and help with some of that barrier to adoption, which is so many different providers. If you think about your house and my house, for instance, I have a garage door that we had to replace, and we put in a Wi-Fi one. It just happens to be Wi-Fi. So I got an app for the garage door. I got an app for my Nest thermostats. I got an app for my children's bedroom cameras, right? And so I got 3 apps, and boy, wouldn't it be nice to have one app that could control the whole house,
Sure.
right? And that is happening in the home space, right? Like I've gone that direction. In the away from home space, that's evolving as we speak. And I like to call them integrators. Sometimes I get beat up over calling them integrators, but there's a handful of those coming in, and they seem to be a little bit segment specific, but they're broadening across segments. But we're really starting to talk to a lot of these folks, because what they'll do is take information, or API as we call it,
Sure.
data from many different hardware providers, and ultimately put it onto a single pane of glass.
Yep.
And the capability of some of these integrators is really pretty phenomenal, in the sense that, they digest that data and they develop stories out of it, right? So it goes far beyond some of the limited capabilities of certain hardwares, and it starts to pull in predictive analytics and AI and start to kind of allow the facility to operate proactively versus reactively. So the integrators, I think, are really going to be the next thing that comes into this space that helps drive it forward, and may just be that single point of contact for customers. You're already seeing some of the large BSCs partner with these folks.
Yep.
To be the foundation for what they serve up to the market in terms of their smart cleaning platform.
Same thing with large let's just think about large commercial office towers who own hundreds of buildings across the country. So ideally, a few years from now, they could all be tied in and looking at quality, looking at whether it be restroom, whether it be air, whatever it may be, right?
That's right. Yeah, you look at, a couple to name, 24/7 is in the sports and entertainment space, and that's an all-encompassing program that brings in work orders into the system too. So it's all on one single operating system. Yeah. InfoGrid is another that's really entering the States with force, and we're really tight with those guys, and learning from each other, right? All these partnerships are not only about sharing with customers some knowledge, but also knowledge amongst ourselves, because this space is changing so fast. But it's just been a great learning experience for me, and again, my team's just been out just absolutely crushing it, and customers are coming to us. One of the funny things is for a long time, our KOLO team has been asking customers, hey, can we do a testimonial? And some of these major sporting arenas will come and ask for a marketing program or something along those lines, but all of a sudden, customers are coming out of the blue and calling us and saying, hey, can we do a testimonial? Right?
Really?
ESG is becoming a big thing in the office space, and to some degree other segments as well. But customers leveraging, investing in these technologies are starting to reap the benefits of it, right? And they want to scream from their rooftops saying, we're investing in this, and we should be we're elevated within the offering. If you're a tenant looking for space, right? We can promise you we're more sustainable. We have a better tenant experience because we're doing things like adopting smart restroom technology.
Are you seeing people truly proactively marketing that, through proposals, but also if I'm a commercial office tower, I'm saying this is one of the things we have, just so you know?
It is. And the BSCs are bringing it in terms of to the properties. The properties are doing it too. They're marketing that, right? We launched a press release with Sage Realty, which Sage Realty, if you're not familiar with it, they have 6 Class A office buildings in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And they invested and adopted KOLO across all 6 facilities late last year, beginning part of this year, and they're up and running. And we just launched a press release the week of ISSA with them and in partnership with them, right? And speaking to kind of the metrics that they're getting after with KOLO and what it's done to meet their operational goals around tenant experience and just elevated experience for their tenants. And it's been extremely powerful. In a couple of weeks, we're launching a testimonial video that we went down there and recorded. So a lot of cool stuff coming out of that, and more to come too.
Awesome.
Different segments.
So to back up a little bit, so you and your team, which we'll put the information on the show notes, but reach out to you guys. Coordinate a call, probably be initial kind of just a discovery call that would happen, probably virtual, could be live, could be whatever. What's the process once you reach out to you guys? What is the steps you would follow?
Right. So, initially we'd set up, up to the customer. If they want somebody in person, we can definitely arrange that. Mm-hmm. But either way, it's an initial kind of introduction into the system, some of the value it can provide, at least, what we see average across all of our active sites. How would it benefit their specific segment operation? Bring in some partner information too, so get them a little bit more educated across IoT, not just for the smart restroom, but beyond that as well. And hopefully spark some interest, right? And then the next step would be start to get some site specific information. So that includes, blueprints to help us build out what a network would look like. And then dispenser counts to help us kind of understand what scale this site would be, and very quickly we turn around with a cost, a quote for them. Mm-hmm. Our agreements are generally 3 years. We have some flexibility to that, and then we also come back to them, and what we do is we say, hey, this is your impact calculator, but it's not just your impact calculator that we're throwing out there. This is your goal sheet. This is what we're going to set.
I love that. If you don't set those expectations up front, then you're doomed to fail regardless, because their expectations in their head are not the same as what you can deliver. And you've got to get those in parity, right?
That's it. You got to own up to that. Like if that's what you say could be their ROI, then why isn't it the goal, yep. Right? So if we're calling out 50% reduction in waste, our goal is to go get you to that, and we're going to be right their arm over your shoulder saying, okay, this is why we aren't there, and this is what we have to do to go get that. And one of the biggest differentiators that the KOLO that we offer, it's an incremental investment for us, but we have what's called a customer success team.
Yep.
And KOLO is sold direct to the customer, and then the consumables, of course, go through a distributor. But in doing so, there needs to be some sort of responsibility about monitoring the system, helping them understand if there's offline devices. I mean, you think about your internet at home, it's not always up and running perfectly. Sometimes devices fall offline.
People smash dispensers, things happen. The world still goes on, right?
Exactly. And there's a behavior change that if we don't do it, will they do it? We don't know. Right. So, we have this customer success team, two individuals that are fantastic. And ultimately, my team works on selling in the KOLO system. And there's a kind of a transfer period when we put the deployment team out in market on the site to install the system. The customer success manager who is dedicated to that site ultimately gets introduced and starts to kind of fade in and take over the relationship with the customer. And that person is their point person from that point on for however long they use KOLO.
Yeah.
they're meeting with the site on they send them a weekly performance report, and then they meet with them on, depending on what the customer wants, right? Anywhere from a monthly to a quarterly basis to say, here's how we're tracking against your metrics. Here's some suggestions on how I think you could leverage the platform more. So we've heard some of our competitors aren't offering that type of service up. And it's one that we know our customers value very much, because it is, it's one of those things that is a behavior change in adopting this, right? And with such high turnover in the clean team, industry, we need to stay on top of training. So we'll often go out and do the initial training when we launch the site, and then we'll go back and do recurring trainings. The other part of the deployment is we actually put the system in, and then we do a 30-day silent period. So in essence, we put the system in, we turn it on, we watch it. The customer doesn't have access to it yet. And the reason we do that is to create a baseline.
Gotcha.
What are their previous behaviors, and what kind of waste is that generating?
So they're still doing checks like they normally would. Right?
They're acting as if, they're working with new dispensers, but they're still going around and opening the dispenser and checking it, so we can see how many unnecessary dispenser checks they're doing.
Awesome.
And so forevermore, that's kind of how they historically operated. And so that's how we can compare the benefits of KOLO to behavior prior to KOLO.
That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So we've got the dynamics. So this is exciting. It's not going backwards. You're only going forwards. Now I'll put you on the spot a little bit. If you had a couple of markets that you really want to penetrate that you haven't penetrated thus far, give me some areas that you really want to say. New York's already in it. I know Boston's already into it. Again, I'm talking Northeast because that's where my proximity is, but where is a market that you would really like to get to that you haven't gotten to yet? Yeah,
I'm happy to say that, we have customers in pretty much every major market across North America. We get a lot of requests for Canada and overseas too.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we're not set up. We are set up for consumable business in Canada, but we're not offering KOLO in Canada yet. Hawaii is an opportunity right now for us.
That would be a good visit.
I think that would be an ideal site just for the visit. But no, I mean, I would tell you that the South is probably adopting a little bit slower than the Northeast and certainly the West. The Silicon Valleys, the LAs. The West Coast and the East Coast are definitely heavy on adoption. Manhattan's really making a strong push. It's been a fun market to play around in. And man, I've got a great sales resource in the West too. And she recently kind of moved from the East to that market, and she's doing a great job. We have a relatively new sales resource in the South who actually has a background in selling IoT technology. She's doing fantastic in the South, but that's a market that we really want to get going. Dallas, we have some footprint in Dallas and in Austin, but really like to kind of forge that market ahead a little bit and get that one going. Well,
that's it's all good stuff. And I appreciate the time. I've learned, I knew some about this going into it. It's been a few years, but I appreciate the time and the insight. I think the personal side, I'm still huge on relationships, people knowing you. Again, my hope is people across the globe, not just the United States, not just the Northeast, will get to know you and kind of know your story, know a little more about GP and kind of the culture there that you spoke about. But the KOLO, I think, again, it's not going backwards. It's only going forwards. And whatever we can do here at Clean Square, the Chasing Dirt podcast, I just want to get some attention out there. And hopefully this hour conversation we had, kind of fast tracked a lot of conversations that need to happen anyway. So thank you again. Thank you to GP as well. And unless there's any other feedback you have or next steps,
just absolute pleasure. And we'll certainly get the contact information out there to the listening audience. And again, super, super proud of what you're doing here. And
episode 1, it's going to get better.
Clean Square is up and coming, man. It's you got some great content out there, and this is just to get this off and running though. It's been a big feat. So I remember talking to you a year ago, and this was, the idea was baked, but man, there was still a big road ahead. So
it's the technology piece, but the cool thing I want to do, I want to meet cool guys like you. And there's hundreds within this industry, and I think there's hundreds of end users that are you've met a lot of just cool people that know the business, understand the business, that teach you something. And I hope to just meet some nice, cool people along the way and some really next level, technology along the way. So I'm going to open this up to a lot of manufacturers. I've got a few BSCs that have already agreed to come and talk what they do differently. So it's going to be a work in progress, but I think, if we can all learn from each other and move this industry forward, I think it's going to be a very interesting next 10 years for the industry overall. So
a lot of fun.
Thank you,
I applaud
Rex.
what you're doing. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
So I'm going to get manual here, and we're going to take it out of this. And thank you guys for episode 1. Rex Moon, Georgia Pacific Pro, GP Pro. Rex, thank you, buddy.
Thanks, Jack.